Astrology versus human design. Two powerful systems that claim to reveal who we really are and why we're here. One dates back over 4,000 years. The other arrived in 1987 through a mystical experience. So in this video, we'll dive into what sets them apart, what connects them, and the unique insights each one offers. Whether you're a skeptic or a seeker, what we might uncover might just surprise you. The history of astrology goes back thousands of years and has been the lifetime study of thousands of academics and practitioners. Despite all the skepticism and mockery, this system has survived and been relevant to cultures for thousands of years, and I don't see that stopping anytime soon. To give the basics, what we call astrology, tracking the planets and their effects, originates from Mesopotamia around 2000 to 3000 BC, later spreading to ancient India and ancient Greece, which is where horoscopic astrology developed to give insight into the person and their life. The premise was primitive and simple. Celestial phenomena correlates with events on Earth. In its primitive days, when ancient Mesopotamians saw an eclipse in the sky, they believed it was an omen and that the death of a king was imminent. Reflecting their naivety, they would perform a substitute king ritual so that the curse of the eclipse could be applied to the fake king for the day, killing him rather than the actual king. This really reflects the early magic animistic values and worldviews characterized in integral theory by the magenta or magic stage of development. This is a pre-rational science of sorts, where magical and mythical planets and gods had a real power over the people. An eclipse was a real threat, for example, in which the magic sky god had the literal power to kill the king for lack of any other scientific, rational, intellectual development. This was a very early stage of development for these societies and their culture, and their practices reflected that. Over thousands of years, the knowledge was developed and evolved by the Assyrians, and later in ancient India around 2000 BC, and then in ancient Greece, where we pretty much know that techniques were swapped and developed between those two cultures, leading us to the chart-based astrology we know today. Greece had Vetius Valens, India had Parashara. Reflecting the worldview and stage of development of those societies, these astrological techniques aimed for predictive events, not only for the society and the tribe at large, think eclipse is going to kill the king, but to individuals as well. You'll get married at this time, you'll gain money at this time, so on. When the Enlightenment happened in the 1700s and the emergence of the orange modern stage of development as it's identified in integral theory came about, with its worldviews and values of science, rationality, logic, analysis, individualism, atheism, and the whole scientific revolution became mainstream, when all that happened, most forms of astrology were chastised, seen as a dirty counterpart to its true scientific discipline, astronomy. Any ancient religions or mystical or spiritual techniques associated with dogmatic religions or pre-rational thinking were now rejected by the culture because of their old dogmatic, outdated stench, which just couldn't cut it in the new scientific revolution, where every aspect of reality now must be proved empirically with data and evidence. And so much ancient wisdom were lost, as Western culture at the time threw the baby out with the bathwater. Instead of an astrologer advising the tribe that their crops would fail and the king would die, in the modern context, psychological astrology takes the archetypes of the planets, signs, and houses, and aspects between them to guide an individual in their life journey or with a specific psychological block. For example, career guidance, relationship compatibility, that sort of stuff. That's where we're at today. So there are primarily two camps of modern astrologers. Those who practice what we call Western or Hellenistic astrology, which is primarily influenced by the ancient Greek Hellenistic tradition, and those who practice the ancient Indian system called Jyotish or Vedic astrology. Of course, Chinese astrology, Sheng Zhao, is also a huge player in the East, but for the modern Western audience, we'll be keeping in mind Western Hellenistic astrology and Vedic astrology, Jyotish. Astrology has been witnessing a major revival and comeback in the last few decades after the green pluralistic stage of development exploded onto the scene in the 1960s. This really was the birth of all things hippie into the mainstream. The values and worldviews of this stage are perfectly mapped by multiple developmental psychologists, and it's often called the green, relativistic, pluralistic, or individualistic stage of development in different developmental psychology models. Since the New Age revolution of the 60s, astrology's made a comeback, and it's probably stronger now more than ever. A market research future report states that astrology's total market size was valued at $14.3 billion in 2024, with projected growth from $15 billion in 2025 to $25 billion by 2034, an annual compound growth rate of 6%, which is almost unheard of during previous decades. According to a 2024 Harris poll, 51% of Americans believe in astrology to some degree, whilst 18% are total believers, seeing it as meaningful and predictive. Millennials show the strongest engagement. About 65% of millennials consult astrology for career advice, and 81% say it helps improve their relationships. These types of statistics would have been unheard of 20 years ago. As for me, I think it's got about a 65% hit rate for psychological analysis and event predictions, which, whilst isn't 100%, is absolutely crazy considering we're just taking positions of planets in a sky and mapping a chart. It shouldn't happen. So to get even a 65% hit rate is insane. I don't buy everything totally. I'm not 100% bought in, but I use it as one of my tools in my multi-perspectival tool belt. I find that in retrospect, mundane astrology, the worldly event archetypal predictions, hit more often than not, and I've certainly seen in my own tendencies, reflections, and even career aspirations reflected in the archetypes of both Western and Vedic astrological charts. I think astrology is true depending on the specific system and calculations used, but only partially true, and must be used as one tool in the tool belt for understanding yourself and the reality we're in. I don't fully accept it and concede the many flaws in it, but I've experimented and researched enough to be convinced of it being a legitimate model of looking at the world. Most people don't understand that astrology, regardless of what system, is fundamentally archetypally predictive, not specifically predictive. If an astrologer can predict a concrete event in your future, something like you're going to travel to this specific country, meet a partner of this specific heritage, or work as this specific job title, they would be in the top 10 astrologers in the entire world. That would be completely insane. To set some expectations, most astrologers can archetypally analyze the characteristics of you, your interests, and perhaps characteristics and behaviors, with some general predictions for your future. For example, Jupiter transiting the 10th house, you're going to advance in your career to some extent, or take on a leadership or education role. Notice that it's not what company, what city, what job title, the pay grade. That's completely unrealistic. But the fact that there is a mechanism in reality that seemingly archetypally points towards future events in your life is completely mind-blowing in and of itself, and deserves intensely serious research and respect, even if it only had a 50% hit of accuracy. We simply shouldn't be able to tell anything about anyone from the time, date, and place of their birth, and yet those trained in the skill of astrology, which has been with us for thousands of years, seemingly have a decent chance at it. This obviously challenges a lot of our material, physical notions of reality and how time works as a whole. But how can anyone make life decisions or predictions about people based on their sun sign? Well, that's where 99% of people go wrong. To quote Rick Levine, the astrology that you are skeptical of is not the astrology I'm practicing. 99% of people's understanding of astrology is sun signs, Libra, Aries, so on. So of course it sounds ridiculous that one could premise life predictions on 1 out of 12 types. And all astrologers actually totally agree with you. It's complete nonsense and pseudoscience to judge based on one placement, because that isn't real astrology. So let's take a look at an actual astrological chart. It looks something like this. There's a circle visualization in Western systems and a diamond visualization in Vedic systems. Both show the same information in different ways. The number of possible unique birth charts is astronomically large. When we further include Hellenistic techniques such as aspects, decans, terms, and fixed star placements, each chart becomes even more distinctly unique. Even twins born minutes apart will have measurably different charts due to their rapid movement of the ascendant, which is approximately 1 degree every 4 minutes. The mathematical uniqueness of birth charts is further amplified when considering other traditions like Vedic astrology, which employs subdivisions such as the nakshatras and the many different divisional charts, the vargas, such as the Navamsha, the Dashamsha, and the Vimshamsha, subdividing the initial chart in specific ways to gain more granular insights into different life areas. And I believe Vedic astrology has up to 60 different divisional charts, which is insane. So with the astrological chart being unique to the individual and even identical twins born minutes apart, and with a history of it being used to make personal predictions and analyses, it makes sense that as a valuable psychological tool, it shouldn't be discounted at all.
In cases of difficult psychological diagnosis, I usually get a horoscope to have a further point of reference.
Carl Jung, one of the figures that established the modern Western psychotherapeutic practices that are the basis for many forms of therapy that we use today, secretly admitted after he had retired to studying and using astrology with his patients as a diagnostic practice. Think about that. A founding father in Western psychology whose work was expanded upon into modern forms of psychotherapy that are totally culturally and academically accepted to this day, consulted astrological charts. Astrology provided Jung a means to a fuller understanding of the analyses, the true nature and unique individuation journey of his clients. Stephanie Buck, an academic, wrote a full published paper on Jung's use of astrology, saying,
"Experience, not belief, was Jung's guide in his phenomenologically based psychological investigations. Jung was working with horoscopes by 1911, and he consulted astrological charts over the next 40 years or so. Jung's correspondence reveals that he enjoyed discussing astrological matters and astronomical phenomena with like-minded individuals into his later years.